Have you ever been in one of those arguments that just goes nowhere? It feels impossible, like you're just talking in circles. Well, what if you could navigate those conversations, not by fighting harder, but by drawing a totally new kind of map? Today, we're going to dive into a method called Tamaraland that's designed to do exactly that, to find a way through conversations that feel completely stuck. But before we get to the map itself, let's start with a question we've all asked ourselves at some point. Why do so many arguments, especially the really important ones, just spin their wheels? You know the feeling. You talk past each other, you get defensive, and at the end of it all, absolutely nothing has changed. It's beyond frustrating. So here's the core problem, according to the Tamaraland framework. We get trapped fighting for a single story. We go into a disagreement assuming that there can only be one true version of events, one right perspective. And that immediately turns the conversation into a battlefield where the only goal is to win. Tamaraland offers a completely different way of looking at it. Instead of a battlefield, it asks us to imagine the conversation as this: living, sprawling building with a ton of different rooms. And in each of those rooms, a totally different story is unfolding. And here's the key part. No single person can see the whole building at once. It's not a weapon for debate. It's an architecture for dialogue. Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? Well, it's all built on 7 core principles. The first, and maybe the most fundamental one, is this idea of rooms. The whole idea of rooms is about bringing dignity back into the conversation. It recognizes that every single person is speaking from their own valid, lived experience. They're in their own room. And crucially, it accepts that nobody has access to all the rooms at the same time. Just that one simple affirmation, your experience makes sense from where you stand, can completely change the entire dynamic of a conflict. And if our different perspectives are rooms, then the second principle is all about what connects them. And those are the hallways. These are the spaces between our settled ideas. You know, hallways are so important because real change, real transformation happens in that moment of uncertainty. It's that messy middle part where our old story is starting to fall apart, but the new one hasn't quite formed yet. That's the hallway. This principle protects that uncomfortable, ambiguous space. It normalizes the idea that it is perfectly okay not to have the answer yet. Now, this whole process, this whole building, it only works if people want to be there, which brings us to principle number 3, doors. Think about it. The second someone feels forced or trapped in a conversation, what happens? Their defenses shoot right up. Doors are all about choice. Dialogue is an invitation, not a demand. By making it crystal clear that someone can step back or even leave the conversation and still be respected, you actually make it more likely that they'll engage honestly. The fourth principle asks us to think not just about who's in the room, but what and who is missing. This is the idea of the empty chair. With this principle, absence isn't just emptiness. It's a presence that actively shapes the conversation. The empty chair is there to honor the perspectives of those who've been silenced, those who've left, or even generations that aren't here yet. It forces a certain humility and makes the whole conversation more honest by acknowledging losses and erased histories. So what happens when we start to acknowledge our own blind spots? Well, that leads us right into the 5th principle, which is just a powerful dose of humility. It's called the map you don't have. This one right here challenges the overconfidence that fuels so many arguments. It's the simple but profound recognition that nobody is holding the complete map of reality. And once you accept that, certainty just gives way to curiosity. All of a sudden, a disagreement isn't an attack you have to defend against. It's just a piece of the map that you are missing. All right, so from our own blind spots, we now turn to our history with the 6th principle, which is footprints. This whole idea is about connecting our present conflicts to everything that came before. You know, conflicts almost never appear out of thin air. They carry the footprints of the past, old wounds, broken promises, patterns that we've inherited. By grounding the conversation in that history, behavior that seemed completely irrational can suddenly start to make sense. It restores the context. And finally, after looking back with footprints, our 7th principle has us look forward. This is the 7th room. The 7th room really widens our perspective. It asks us to shift from trying to win an argument today to thinking about our responsibility for tomorrow. Just by asking, how will our choices affect the people who come after us? It changes the goal from short-term victory to long-term stewardship. and that can cool down even the most heated fights. Okay, so how do all these principles come together visually? Well, it's about co-creating a map of the conversation itself. But it's really, really important to understand how not to do it. What you're seeing here is what's called a pre-wired map. It imposes a structure, right? It connects ideas like fear and grievance before anyone's even said a word. The creator of Tamaraland argues this just violates the whole spirit of the thing. And that contrast is everything. A pre-wired map, it suggests the person running the meeting already knows the right connections. It makes these abstract ideas feel like solid facts. But the Tamaraland approach uses derived paths. The map starts blank. It gets created during the conversation, which means it admits uncertainty and preserves that humility we were just talking about. And this co-creation process is actually pretty straightforward. It happens in 2 phases. Phase 1 is co-presence. You just establish who's in the conversation. You literally map out the different points of view. Then, in phase 2, crossings, as people talk and their stories connect or intersect, they mark that spot on the map and they tag it with one of the 7 principles. The map becomes this living, breathing trace of the actual conversation. So where does this fit in with other big ideas about storytelling? Well, if you think about it, Aristotle was looking for a single, coherent plot. Someone like Jordan Peterson focuses on a shared myth to help us make sense of chaos. But Tomorrowland, its goal is totally different. It's about co-presence without needing a shared story. It's built for a world where there are many truths, and the structure has to emerge from the conversation itself. And what this all boils down to is that we have to completely redefine what success even looks like in a difficult conversation. The goal is no longer agreement, it's curiosity. It's not about winning, it's about understanding. And it's not about forcing everyone into a consensus, but simply achieving co-presence, the ability to stay in the room together even when you deeply, deeply disagree. This quote really captures the heart of the whole idea. Tamaraland treats conflict not as a problem to be solved, but as a place to be entered with care. It reframes conflict as just another part of our shared building, a room that asks for our humility and our respect, not our weapons. And that really brings us to the challenge of this entire framework. The next time you find yourself in a disagreement, whether it's big or small, what do you think would happen if you stopped fighting so hard for your own room and instead just tried to listen for theirs? Can you get curious about the part of the map you don't have?